The man stared at his trading screen at 2 in the morning. He had made $30,000 that day, more than most people earn in 6 months, yet he could not stop. He kept opening new positions, chasing one more gain, pursuing one more win. His hands trembled as he clicked. His heart raced with each price movement. He told himself he was being strategic. He told himself he was maximizing opportunity. But the truth was simpler and more painful. He was terrified. Terrified that what he had was not enough. Terrified that he would lose it. Terrified that stopping meant falling behind. His greed looked like ambition from the outside. But from the inside, it felt like pure fear. This video will show you why greed and fear are the same emotion wearing different masks, how the pursuit of wealth is often the flight from insecurity, and what the Stoics understood about the psychology of accumulation that modern culture refuses to acknowledge. There was a woman who earned more than she could spend. Her salary was enormous. Her bonuses were substantial. Her investments grew consistently. By any reasonable measure, she had achieved financial security. She could retire tomorrow and live comfortably for the rest of her life. Yet she worked 70 hours each week. She pursued every promotion. She chased every opportunity for additional income. When friends asked why she worked so hard, she said she loved her career. But alone at night, she knew the truth. She was afraid. Afraid of being poor again like she was as a child. Afraid of losing what she had built. Afraid of the vulnerability that comes with having enough. As long as she kept accumulating, she did not have to face that fear. As long as she kept winning, she did not have to acknowledge what she was running from. Her childhood had been difficult. Her family struggled financially. She remembered the stress in her parents' voices when bills arrived. She remembered the shame of wearing old clothes to school. She remembered feeling powerless and small. She had promised herself she would never feel that way again, and she had kept that promise. She had built walls of money around herself, walls so thick that poverty could never reach her again. But the walls that kept poverty out also kept peace out. She was safe but not satisfied, secure but not settled, protected but not present. Her greed was not about wanting more. It was about needing to never want again. It was fear disguised as ambition. She attended a philosophy lecture one evening, more to network than to learn. The speaker discussed Stoicism and mentioned something that stopped her cold. He said that greed and fear are two sides of the same coin, that when you grab for more, you are really running from not enough. That accumulation is often compensation for inner emptiness, that the person who cannot stop acquiring is the person most afraid of losing. The words hit her like a physical blow because they were true. Her entire adult life had been organized around fear. Every decision, every sacrifice, every late night at the office. She called it drive and ambition and wealth mindset, but it was fear, just fear. The Stoics understood this connection intimately. Seneca wrote extensively about the psychology of accumulation. He observed that the richest people were often the most anxious, that having more created the need to protect more, that every gain produced new vulnerability. He watched wealthy Romans build fortress homes and hire armies of guards, not because they faced real threats, but because their wealth created imagined threats. The more they had, the more they feared losing it. Their greed for additional security was really fear of insufficient security. The cycle had no end because there is no amount of money that eliminates fear. Fear is internal. Money is external. You cannot solve an internal problem with an external solution. Marcus Aurelius wrote about powerful men who accumulated obsessively despite having everything. He noted that their accumulation accelerated as their wealth grew. They did not slow down when they reached sufficiency. They sped up. This pattern reveals the truth. If greed were really about wanting more, it would diminish as you acquired more. But it does not. It intensifies. This is because greed is not about the things themselves. It is about the fear beneath them. The fear of not being enough. The fear of being exposed as insufficient. The fear of vulnerability that comes with stopping. Consider the analogy of someone building walls around their home. At first, the walls are necessary. They provide real protection. But then the person keeps building. They add more walls, higher walls, thicker walls. They build walls around the walls. They can no longer see out. Light cannot get in. They are surrounded by protection but living in darkness. At what point did the walls stop being protection and start being a prison? At what point did reasonable security become pathological fear? This is what happens with wealth accumulation. It starts as rational planning. It becomes compulsive hoarding. The transition is invisible because both look like responsible behavior from the outside. Epictetus taught his students to examine their desires carefully, to ask not just what they wanted but why they wanted it. Most people never do this. They chase money without asking what the money represents. They pursue financial independence without defining what independence means. They seek capital preservation without questioning what they are really preserving. When you examine these desires honestly, you find fear at the root. Fear of being powerless, fear of being helpless, fear of returning to a state of need. The greed is just the symptom. The fear is the disease. If you have ever felt that no amount would be enough, write "examine" in the comments. Let that word remind you to look beneath your desires to the fear that drives them. Now, we explore how greed and fear operate in daily life and how to break their control. The connection between greed and fear manifests in specific patterns. Understanding these patterns allows you to recognize when you are being driven by fear disguised as ambition. The first pattern is the moving target. You tell yourself you will stop when you reach a specific number. When you have 1 million saved, you will relax. But when you reach 1 million, the target moves to 2 million, then 5 million, then 10 million. The number is irrelevant because the number was never the real goal. The real goal is to eliminate fear, and no amount of money eliminates fear. So the target keeps moving. You keep chasing. The chase becomes your identity. You are no longer pursuing financial security. You are fleeing from insecurity. The direction looks forward, but the motivation looks backward. You are running away rather than moving toward. The second pattern is the comparison trap. You measure your success against others. You were content until you saw what someone else had. Then your contentment transformed into inadequacy. Your sufficiency became lack. This reveals that your greed is not about your actual needs. It is about your relative position, and relative position is infinite. There is always someone with more, always someone doing better, always someone ahead of you. When your peace depends on comparison, you guarantee your own suffering. The Stoics called this enslaving yourself to externals. You have given others control over your inner state. Your greed to match or exceed them is really fear of being less than them. The third pattern is the inability to enjoy what you have. You acquire something you wanted, a promotion, a bonus, a successful investment, but the satisfaction lasts hours at most. Then you are focused on the next thing. You cannot rest in achievement. You cannot savor success. You move immediately to the next goal. This restlessness is fear. Fear that stopping means stagnating. Fear that contentment means complacency. Fear that if you stop climbing, you will fall. So you keep climbing even though you passed your destination miles ago. You keep moving even though you do not know where you are going. The motion itself becomes the point because motion feels like progress and stillness feels like death. The fourth pattern is the hoarding behavior. You have more than you need, but you cannot spend it. You tell yourself you are being prudent. You tell yourself you are practicing building wealth quietly, but really you are afraid. Afraid that spending diminishes your security. Afraid that using your resources makes you vulnerable. So you accumulate and protect and guard. Your wealth sits unused while you live like someone who has nothing. You have built financial abundance but maintained a scarcity mentality. The greed that drove accumulation becomes the fear that prevents utilization. You are rich on paper but poor in experience. The fifth pattern is the sacrifice of relationships. You choose work over family, deals over friends, accumulation over connection. You tell yourself it is temporary. You tell yourself you are building something for them. But the truth is darker. You choose money over people because money feels controllable, and people do not. You choose accumulation over relationship because accumulation feels like progress and relationship feels messy. This is fear of intimacy disguised as dedication to financial success. It is easier to focus on numbers than feelings. Easier to manage a portfolio than navigate human complexity. So you hide in your work and call it ambition, but you are hiding from vulnerability, and vulnerability is where connection lives. The Stoics offer a path out of this trap, not through eliminating desire but through understanding it, not through rejecting wealth but through examining your relationship with it. Here is how you separate healthy ambition from fear-driven greed. First, define your enough number with precision. Not an aspirational number, not a number that would impress others, your actual enough, the amount that would allow you to live comfortably, handle emergencies, and sleep peacefully. Write this number down. When you reach it, acknowledge that you have reached it. This does not mean you stop working. It means you stop working from fear. Everything beyond enough is surplus. You can pursue surplus from choice rather than compulsion. From creativity rather than anxiety, from genuine interest rather than desperate need. This shift transforms everything. Second, practice spending intentionally. If you have resources but cannot use them, you are still trapped by fear. The Stoics were not ascetics. They understood that wealth is a tool meant to be used wisely. Seneca owned vast estates, but he also gave lavishly. He understood that money flows. Hoarding it creates stagnation. Using it wisely creates life. Practice spending on things that genuinely improve your existence. Experiences with loved ones. Tools that support meaningful work. Gifts that strengthen relationships. This practice confronts your fear directly. It proves that spending does not equal loss. It proves that using resources does not create vulnerability. It proves that you can live abundantly without losing security. Third, examine each financial decision for its true motivation. Before pursuing an opportunity, ask yourself honestly, am I doing this because it excites me or because I am afraid of missing out? Am I pursuing this from abundance or from scarcity? Am I moving towards something or running from something? The distinction matters because decisions made from fear rarely lead to satisfaction. You can achieve everything you sought and still feel empty because you were seeking the wrong thing. You were trying to accumulate enough money to eliminate fear when fear cannot be eliminated through accumulation. It can only be eliminated through inner work. Fourth, build relationships that exist outside of money. Friendships with people who do not care about your net worth. Connections based on shared interests rather than business opportunities. Family time that has nothing to do with providing financially. These relationships reveal who you are beyond your bank account. They connect you to your humanity. They remind you that your value is not your wealth. When you have relationships that exist independently of money, losing money becomes less terrifying. You know you would still have connection. You know you would still have value. You know you would still be yourself. Fifth, practice voluntary simplicity regularly. Spend a day living simply. Eat basic food. Wear ordinary clothes. Do free activities. This practice serves multiple purposes. It proves you can be happy with less. It reveals that your current lifestyle is choice rather than necessity. It shows you that much of what you think you need is actually just habit. It confronts the fear that drives greed by demonstrating that the fear is unfounded. You would be fine with less. You would survive. You might even thrive. This knowledge is liberating because it removes the desperation from your pursuit. Sixth, give generously and anonymously. Greed hoards. Generosity releases. When you give without recognition, you prove to yourself that your worth is not tied to accumulation. You demonstrate that you have enough, that you can afford to share, that your security does not depend on keeping everything you acquire. This practice directly counters the fear beneath greed. Each act of giving says, I have enough. I am enough. I do not need to grasp and clutch and hoard. This message, repeated over time, transforms your relationship with money completely. Seventh, track satisfaction rather than accumulation. Keep a journal of moments that brought genuine joy. You will notice a pattern. The moments that matter have little to do with money. A conversation, a sunset, a moment of connection, a problem solved, a skill mastered. When you track what actually creates satisfaction, you realize how little your happiness depends on your net worth. This realization weakens the grip of greed because greed promises satisfaction through accumulation. When you see clearly that accumulation does not deliver satisfaction, the promise loses power. The fear that drives greed begins to dissolve. Eighth, confront your worst-case scenario directly. What are you actually afraid of? Losing everything and being homeless. Write out exactly what that would look like. Not the exaggerated fear version, but the realistic version. You have skills, you have knowledge, you have relationships. You would find work. You would rebuild. You would survive. When you confront the worst case directly, it loses its power over you. The fear was always worse in imagination than it would be in reality. This confrontation does not make you reckless. It makes you free. Free to pursue opportunities from genuine interest rather than desperate fear. Free to take calculated risks rather than hoarding in paralysis. The tragedy of greed is that it never delivers what it promises. It promises security but creates anxiety. It promises satisfaction but creates restlessness. It promises control but creates compulsion. The person driven by greed is the person most enslaved by fear. They cannot rest because rest feels dangerous. They cannot enjoy because enjoyment feels wasteful. They cannot connect because connection feels risky. They have built a fortress of wealth that has become a prison of fear. They won the game but lost themselves in the process. The woman from our story began to change, not through dramatic action but through honest examination. She started asking herself why before every decision. Why am I pursuing this promotion? Why am I checking my accounts obsessively? Why can I not enjoy what I have? The answers were uncomfortable. She was afraid of being poor again, afraid of being powerless, afraid of the fear itself. Acknowledging this fear did not eliminate it immediately, but it stopped the fear from controlling her unconsciously. She could see it. She could question it. She could choose differently. She began spending time on things that had nothing to do with money. Hiking, reading, reconnecting with old friends. She discovered something surprising. Her anxiety decreased, not because she earned less. She still worked hard and earned well, but she was working from choice rather than compulsion, from interest rather than fear. Her relationship with money transformed. She still wanted financial security, but she no longer needed it to feel secure. The security came from within. The money just supported it. She was no longer greedy because she was no longer afraid. Consider what your life would look like if your greed dissolved, if you pursued wealth from genuine interest rather than desperate fear, if you worked hard because you loved the work rather than because you feared being without, if you accumulated resources because they served your purpose rather than because they filled your void. You would still be ambitious, but your ambition would come from abundance rather than scarcity, from creativity rather than anxiety, from genuine desire rather than compensatory need. This is the difference between healthy ambition and greed. Healthy ambition knows when enough is enough. Greed never does, because greed is really fear and fear is infinite. The Stoics teach that the person who knows they have enough is truly wealthy. The person who always needs more is truly poor regardless of their bank balance. This is not a metaphor. It is a description of reality. The person who cannot stop accumulating is imprisoned by their own success. The person who can say, "I have enough," is free regardless of how much they have. Freedom is internal. Prison is internal. Your bank account is just numbers. Your relationship with those numbers determines whether you are free or trapped. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The fear that drives greed is imagined. The poverty you are running from exists primarily in your mind. Yes, real poverty exists. Yes, real hardship exists. But most people reading this are not facing real poverty. They are facing imagined vulnerability. They are running from a fear that is disproportionate to their actual risk. The greed they feel is not proportionate to their need. It is proportionate to their fear, and their fear is proportionate to their disconnection from inner peace. True wealth is having enough money to be secure and enough wisdom to know when you have reached enough. It is pursuing financial independence from strategy rather than fear. It is accumulating resources without being consumed by accumulation. It is recognizing that your greed is really fear and choosing to address the fear directly rather than feeding it endlessly through accumulation. This recognition changes everything because it allows you to pursue wealth without being enslaved by the pursuit. Greed promises peace through accumulation. It lies. Peace comes through understanding, through examining your relationship with money, through confronting the fear beneath your desire, through building security within rather than seeking it without. When you understand that greed is just another form of fear, you can stop feeding the greed and start healing the fear. This is the only path to genuine financial security, not through having more but through needing less, not through accumulating endlessly but through understanding enough. Subscribe to Money and Stoicism to master your finances and your mind. Like this video if you seek true freedom.